Welcome back to Did You Know, a local history podcast brought to you by CHOP FM, Pickering College, and the History Hound presents. I'm Richard McLeod, the History Hound, and this week I want to highlight the life and contributions of an individual who I believe we can safely call the Mother of Newmarket History, her name being Ethel Willson Trewhell. If you followed my articles, presentations, or videos over the past 40 years, you'll remember that her work is the foundation upon which I and other local historians have built the narratives. She, along with the works of Robert Terence Carter, better known as Terry Carter, have shaped our remembrances of our early history. Ethel Willson Trewhell lived from 1882 until 1959. Having been born in the township of North Glenbury, but in her late teens, she and her family relocated to Newmarket. In this podcast, I want to attempt to place her life and contributions into some sort of context and explain why she is indeed the mother of not only Newmarket history, but that of the whole northern York County area as well. The works mentioned in this article are all available at the Newmarket Library should you wish to check them out. Trewhell was part of a movement that emerged after the First World War, when Canadians right across the country began to see our local history as being of some importance. We begin to see our own history as being worthy of presentation and of research. In many ways, Trewhell was the pillar upon which today's vivid local histories rest. Ethel Willson Trewhell was born in 1882 in the township of North Glenbury, and she was connected to the Children of Peace in Sharon. She would write about her connection to the region in which she lived, a time when a committed amateur historian with the necessary time and resources could strive to bring their local history to the attention of the population. Her work made our local history accessible to the general public and created a permanent record through its publishing. As I indicated above, Trewhell began her life in Sharon before moving with her family to Newmarket. For those who live in Newmarket, her family built a brick home on Millard Avenue, just west of Main Street. The Wilson family became members of the local Newmarket Friends meeting area and were active in the Friends community. It always interests me how a life-changing event can often alter one's goals and life endeavors. Trewhell became a widow at the age of 55 upon the passing of her husband, John Trewhell, on September 17th of 1937. Trewhell began to submit articles for publication in the Newmarket era before the death of her husband, but his passing seemed to give her the impetus to turn her attention to the preservation of our local history. The article Young Street and Historic Friends Meeting House would appear in the June 1937 edition of the Newmarket Era. Her account, The Young Street Quakers, a record of both the Orthodox and Hicksite bodies who were present in the area, was published in a booklet form in 1937 by J.M. Walton from Aurora. After this article was published, and after the death of her husband in 1937, it appears that she took a bit of a break from her writing. However, after the war, she produced another article entitled Tales of Early History of Friends on Young Street. This article appeared in May of 1946. Several years later, she produced a series of historical tidbits which also appeared in the Newmarket era. They were an account of her own origins, along with several other stories of characters from our past, and they would be published in booklet form in 1949. In May of 1949, she published the history of Job Hughes, Friends Minister of Yonge Street from 1805 to 1807 in the Newmarket era. This particular publication was presented in 4 installments. One of the installments of particular interest was Job Hughes' own story, which appeared in a additional extension, I guess you'd say, of the original article. And it was particularly interesting because she gave an insight into a historical individual that I would think probably very few people knew anything about. For her contributions, she was given an award for the publication, and I think this sort of encouraged her to move on to a larger topic, a more intense topic. Her next writing project, which was produced between the years of 1951 and 1952, was the story of Sharon, published by the era in 42 installments. In June of 1952, Trewhell was made a life member of the York Pioneer and Historical Society in recognition of her writing of the history of Sharon. I would, if you're going to take a look at any of her early writings, I would suggest this might be an excellent one to take a look at. As I say, it was 42 stories of the story of the founding and development of Sharon. It's absolutely unique. At the time that she published this, the whole idea of stories being printed in a series of installments over a period of time was very popular, and from what I understand, people impatiently awaited every edition of the era to see what topic Trewhell was going to take on next. Trewhell was part of the establishment of the Sharon Burial Ground Association in 1952, and she served as its first secretary. The idea of a history of Newmarket was bantered around for several years, talking about individuals who they thought could possibly write the book. And Trewhell was one of the people who was suggested, primarily because of her accessibility to a lot of the historical records, and also her connection through her family and her genealogy to a lot of the movers and shakers of our local history. When we come back, we'll take a look at this work and how it changed really the whole story of our local history and how it was portrayed. Welcome back to Did You Know? Before our break, we were taking a look at the plan to write a history of Newmarket and the search to try and find a suitable author for this book. For almost 3 years, the subject of the history of Newmarket was an on and off project, with many people thinking that the possibility of writing such a book was hopeless. As I said, Trewhell was pinholed to be most likely candidate to write this book because of her background, because of the time, fact that she had time to do the necessary research, and she had ties to our local history, which was thought to be very important. Also, one of the reasons why they wanted to get started on this was that it was recognized that several individuals who were still alive and who would be able to give firsthand knowledge of our history were still around, and it was hoped that these people would be able to be interviewed by whoever was going to write the book. And it was clear that Trewhell knew most of these people who would need to be interviewed, and it was felt that not only would she be able to encourage them to participate, but also she would be able to fill in whatever gaps they may have in their memory. So eventually it was determined that she would be the ideal person to write this book. In October of 1953, a recommendation was presented to council that Trewhell should write a history of the town of Newmarket. And the reasons given, as I stated before, were that she was a descendant of early district settlers, and that she had access to more information about the town and the surrounding area than perhaps any other person in Newmarket. Most of all was the fact that she had both the time and the enthusiasm for the job, which of course most people realize is an important element in choosing someone to undertake a large project. When Trewhell was when she finally was authorized to proceed by council, it was decided that she would do the work for the sum of $1,500. Now, I know $1,500 sounds like a lot of money, but when you think about all the research that was involved in writing this book and all of the personal time that was taken up in writing this book, it really is a very small figure. Trewhell immediately started the tedious and time-consuming process of doing the research of the town. From time to time, the Era would publish items of interest which Trewhell had discovered in her research, and people looked forward to these little excerpts, giving you a little behind-the-scenes view of what you could hope for when the book was finished and finally published. Trewhell made several interesting discoveries when she was doing her research. One of the interesting ones was she discovered that all of the records for Newmarket Public Schools, dating back to 1823 when they were first established in the area, were being kept in private collections by the Secretary-Treasurers of the individual educational boards. She put forward a suggestion at council that these resources should be gathered all together and that they should be placed in the provincial archives for safekeeping. Unfortunately, at the 6th of April meeting 1955 of the council, they decided that they wouldn't do that, that they would instead store them in the town vaults for safekeeping. I'll let you, in your own mind, determine whether you think that was a good idea. Now, in 1957, we were already planning for the centennial year of Newmarket's incorporation into a village. And the Centennial Committee were gung-ho to have Trewhell's book available for purchase during the centennial. So they were pushing for Trewhell to forward her manuscript to a publishing firm so that they could get an estimate of how much it would cost to publish the book. This, unfortunately, would begin 10 years of squabbling, postponements, and general mismanagement of the process. When we come back from our break, we'll talk about the publishing of the book and some of the unfortunate circumstances that took place. Welcome back to Did You Know? Before the break, we talked about the fact that it was to take 10 years between the publishing or the completion of Trewhell's manuscript and the eventual publishing of the history. Over that period of time, you may wonder why they had difficulties in moving forward with the project. It seems like right off the bat, there were elements within town who questioned Trewhell's expertise to write such a book. And some people were saying, why would the council just leave her on her own to do her own research and write this book? You know, who's keeping an eye on her? I think this is kind of an insult. As I said before, she had written numerous historical treatises on our history, and they did due diligence, I understand, in selecting her in the first place. And so it seems kind of odd that immediately they would start questioning whether they had picked the right person. In oral history interviews that I've done, people have indicated that there was no reason for them to doubt her, that people who knew her said that she was being diligent in the preparation of the manuscript, and she was doing interviews, what you call first-person history interviews. So she was getting all the information directly from the source, so I don't think there was anything to worry about. But unfortunately, these things happen when you get a number of people involved in a project. I can remember my grandfather telling me that the council suddenly began to question Trewhell's abilities as an author and generally just dilly-dallied around and didn't proceed at all with this project. The cost of publishing became an issue, with the suggestion made that some local businesses or industries should be pressed to underwrite the cost of the publication. It's hard to believe that the issue of copyright arose well after they had set up their agreement with Trewhell, but it did. It appeared that sanity was going to prevail when it was decided that the author would be given the copyright in recognition of all of her work and preparation efforts. Trewhell did not want the royalty payments. She felt that if more copies of the book were sold than were needed to cover the publication costs, that the town could pocket that money and use it for another project, preferably another historical project. So that didn't seem to be an issue. Sadly, the town forced Trewhell to relinquish copyright to the town if she wanted to be recognized for the writing of the book. Now, when I heard this story, I thought, this is absolutely amazing. They've approached the lady to write the history. They've engaged her to write the history. If those of you out there who understand copyright law know that as the author, she would or should have the copyright on the book, but somehow the town convinced her that if she wanted to be recognized as the author of the book, it was necessary that she relinquish the copyright rights to the book, and sadly she agreed. Trewhell, as I said, had been directed by past councils to write the history, and the small monetary reward offered to her was just a token sum, really. Let's be honest, no professional would have ever agreed to undertake the task for that amount of money. The payment offered would merely cover her expenses that she incurred over the several years that she devoted to the research and writing of the book. The town should surely have honored Trewhell for her great efforts rather than, in my opinion, contributing to a sense of personal embarrassment on her part. As I say, I did interviews that indicate that she was embarrassed with the whole process of what it had become. The following spring, Trewhell would sadly die in April of 1959. Her death notice appeared in the Era, and it's interesting that along with her death notice was a plea for funds for the publication of her History of Newmarket. So at that point, they still hadn't resolved the issue of who was going to pay for this. And this is, I think, kind of interesting because, I think it's rather unusual to put a plea for monies to publish a book along with the obituary of the author who wrote the book. I think that's kind of interesting. The details of all the problems associated with the publication of Trewhell's town history were important enough that they rated front page coverage in the Era. People were just appalled that she had spent all this time writing this book, that she had submitted the book, that everybody that read the books commented on what an extremely incredible job she had done in writing the book, and yet they were dragging their feet, and they would drag their feet, well into the 1960s, where the book would just sit in the town archives unpublished. So years went by, and her manuscript was held in the Pickering College vault. The work by the late Trewhell, which was completed in 1959, sat around unpublished. I want you to understand that. So she had spent all this time writing this book, and the book just sat unpublished. It wasn't until 1967 that the town finally decided to publish the History of Newmarket that Trewhell had written, and the book, it was decided, would be dedicated to her memory. The book became an immediate hit. Most people who have seen the book, the thing that you remember is that it was published in a bright green paper cover. It had 371 pages of our local history, gold for people like me who write about our history and do presentations about our history. And she covered the period from our earliest settlement to the mid-1950s. Only 600 copies were ever printed. Now this is interesting because my family, if we use this as an example, bought 6 copies of the book. The idea was that my grandmother wanted to make sure that all the grandchildren got a copy of the book. She felt that it was that impressive and it was that important that we know the history of our town. Sadly, with only 600 copies that were printed, and of course, standard procedures that area libraries would get a copy, and people of importance would be given a copy. So there weren't that many copies out there, and there still aren't many copies. The book has never been republished. There have been efforts, of course, to republish it, but sadly, they never have. One of the advantages is that if you or your relatives have a copy of that book at home, it's worth a fortune. If you just use a historical bookstore as an example, if you go in and if you can find a copy, you likely should be prepared to pay $500 or $600 for a copy of that book, maybe even more, depending on the quality of the book, what kind of condition that it's in after all of these years. Now, most of you know that we as humans have a tendency to complain about everything. I often hear that people tell me that, oh, well, the book was just cobbled together. It was just a series of interviews with old people who gave you their remembrances. People complain about the fact that she didn't provide a very good index to her book. And of course, it's interesting in later years, many individuals have stepped forward and have produced indexes to her book, which, should there ever be a republishing of this book, there certainly are enough quality indexes that they could include it in the republishing of the book. It's interesting also, I probably should point this out, that they did, when it was announced in 59 that she had written this book, the people started paying deposits. It was going to be in that big demand. People started paying deposits on the book. And an amount of $1,575 in advance sales had been collected, and it was held in trust in the bank until it was finally published in 1967. So you had that amount sitting in a bank account awaiting instructions on the printing of the book. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed this little story about Ethel Willson Trewhell. She is, without doubt, the main pillar upon which all subsequent historical works rest. Her contributions to the history of our area, and particularly that of Sharon and Newmarket, stand alone against time. I do a weekly article for Newmarket Today, and for those who have been following that, you will notice that in my source material, it is just full of quotes from her book. If you take a look at almost any writer or any historian of our local history, their presentations and their work is full of references to her history of Newmarket, and so I think it's fair to say that she's definitely a pillar of our local history, and I think she is, unfortunately, went practically unrecognized in the general public. It's such a sad situation that they waited nearly 10 years to publish her book, that she had died before her book was published. I think it's very, very sad. I think we also, we talk about this book that she published, The History of Newmarket, but she also published numerous articles, booklets, and during her lifetime. Remember, she was not a professional writer, nor was she a professional historian. She took the time. She was enthusiastic about our local history, something that I would like to think many of the colleagues that I have who are involved in our local history, and in fact myself, tried to emulate this enthusiasm for our local history and putting the effort into to publishing so that we have some sort of record for future generations. I think Trewhell deserves every bit of acclaim that could be bestowed upon her for the preservation of our history. I hope that you come back and listen to another of our editions of Did You Know? On behalf of CHOP FM, Pickering College, and myself, the History Hound, I hope you enjoy these moments of local history. Have a great day.